The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. Their sleek bioorganic vessels gleamed like pearls against the void, each one a testament to 3,000 years of galactic dominance. Admiral Kethvar stood on the command bridge of the flagship Dominion's Edge, his 4 eyes scanning the primitive solar system before them. "Target confirmed, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Vextal. "Third planet from the star. The species calls themselves humans, according to our intelligence gathering." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. The Zephyrians had been watching this system for decades, observing the crude chemical rockets and primitive radio transmissions. These humans had only recently managed to put a few metal cans into orbit around their world. They were exactly the type of emerging species the Galactic Council loved to recruit as junior partners. "Any military resistance detected?" Kethvar asked, though he already knew the answer. "None, sir. Their most advanced weapons appear to be fusion devices. Crude but effective against their own kind. No energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no faster-than-light capability detected." The Admiral's confidence grew. This would be another textbook integration. The Zephyrian Empire specialized in these operations. Arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate superior technology, offer protection and guidance in exchange for resources and loyalty. Most species were grateful for the opportunity to join galactic civilization rather than face extinction. "Open a communication channel," Kethvar ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves to these humans." The main view screen shimmered to life, showing the blue-green world below. Several small space stations orbited the planet, along with countless pieces of debris that the humans apparently couldn't be bothered to clean up. Typical of primitive species, Kethvar thought. "Attention humans of the third planet," his voice boomed across multiple frequencies. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You have been selected for integration into the Galactic Council. Prepare to receive our diplomatic vessel." The response came faster than expected. A gruff male voice crackled over the communication system, speaking the crude human language that their translators had learned from intercepted transmissions. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Earth's sovereign space. State your intentions immediately." Kethvar's mandibles clicked again, this time in mild irritation. These humans were showing more backbone than most species at first contact. Usually, primitive civilizations were awed into submission by the mere sight of advanced starships. "Admiral Chen," he replied, making sure his tone carried the proper amount of condescension. "Your species lacks the technology to pose any meaningful resistance to our fleet. We come offering membership in galactic civilization. Refuse, and your world will face the consequences of remaining isolated and defenseless." There was a long pause before Chen responded. "Admiral, I'm going to give you one chance to reconsider your approach. Turn your ships around and leave our system. We're not interested in forced integration." The bridge crew of the Dominion's Edge exchanged glances. Lieutenant Vextal leaned toward his admiral. "Sir, should we demonstrate our capabilities? A small show of force usually convinces primitive species to cooperate." Kethvar considered this. The humans had shown more defiance than expected, but nothing that couldn't be corrected with a proper display of Zephyrian power. "Target one of their orbital installations," he commanded. "Something unoccupied. We'll give them a taste of our plasma cannons." The weapons officer began his targeting sequence, focusing on what appeared to be an abandoned satellite. But before he could fire, something unexpected happened. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, his voice filled with alarm. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They're everywhere." Kethvar spun toward the sensor station. "Explain." "Sir, I'm reading dozens of energy sources powering up. They were completely hidden until now. The signatures are They're not matching any known technology in our databases. The main view screen shifted to show a tactical overview of the solar system. Red dots began appearing throughout the display, near the gas giants, in the asteroid belt, even in the outer reaches of the system near the 9th planet. "That's impossible," Lieutenant Vextal whispered. "Our scans showed no advanced technology." Admiral Chen's voice returned, and this time there was something different in her tone, something that made Kethvar's skin crawl. "Admiral Kethvar, I tried to be polite. Your scanning technology is impressive, but it's not quite as advanced as you think. We've been watching your empire's expansion for quite some time. We know about your integration policies. We've seen what happens to species that resist." The tactical display continued to fill with red dots. Kethvar counted 50, then 100, then stopped counting as the numbers climbed higher. "You see," Chen continued, "humanity has had a few advantages in our development that your databases probably don't account for. We're what you might call a naturally paranoid species. We've spent most of our history preparing for war. When we detected your empire's scouts 15 years ago, we didn't panic. We prepared." Kethvar felt his confidence evaporating. "This is some kind of deception. Your species lacks faster-than-light technology. You couldn't have..." "Couldn't have what? Developed defenses? Built a fleet? Admiral, you're making the same mistake every bully makes. You're assuming that being loud and obvious is the same thing as being strong." The sensor operator's voice cracked with disbelief. "Admiral, the energy signatures are off the charts. I'm reading power levels that shouldn't be possible for a species this young." "Let me explain something about humans," Chen said, and Kethvar could hear other voices in the background, calm and professional. "We don't like being threatened. We especially don't like bullies, and we really don't like being underestimated." Suddenly, the space around Earth began to shimmer. Massive structures began to materialize, uncloaking throughout the system. Battleships emerged from behind asteroids where they had been hiding for years. Defense platforms powered up on the far side of the moon. Weapons arrays that dwarfed anything in the Zephyrian fleet came online with the sound of charging energy weapons. But what truly terrified Kethvar was not the size of the human fleet. It was the design. These weren't the crude metal boxes he had expected from a primitive species. These ships were sleek, purposeful, and clearly built by a civilization that understood warfare on a level that made his own empire's 3,000 years of dominance seem like child's play. "You want to know the funny thing about humans?" Chen asked. "We've been preparing for this conversation for our entire existence as a species. Every war we've fought, every weapon we've developed, every strategy we've created has been practiced for the day someone tried to force us into submission." Lieutenant Vextal was frantically working at his console. "Admiral, I'm detecting weapons locked from multiple sources. They have targeting solutions on every ship in our fleet." The view screen shifted to show a close-up of one of the human battleships. It was easily twice the size of the Zephyrian flagship, and its weapons arrays were already glowing with contained energy. "This is your final warning," Admiral Chen said. "Leave our system now, and we'll consider this a misunderstanding. Try to integrate us, and you'll discover why humanity spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We were just practicing." Kethvar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. His fleet of 12 ships, which had successfully integrated 47 species over the past century, was outnumbered 5-1 by vessels that appeared to be technologically superior. "Sir," Lieutenant Vextal whispered, "your orders?" For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar found himself facing an enemy that had prepared for his arrival. The humans hadn't been caught off guard by first contact. They had been waiting for it, and they were ready for war. The question was he ready for what humanity considered a fair fight? Admiral Kethvar's 4 eyes remained fixed on the tactical display as more human vessels continued to decloak throughout the solar system. Each new contact made his situation worse. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Vextal, had gone pale, his usual blue skin taking on an unhealthy gray tinge. "Admiral," Vextal whispered, "I'm reading energy signatures that match theoretical calculations for antimatter containment. Multiple vessels are showing power cores that exceed our own flagship by orders of magnitude." "That's impossible," Kethvar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "A species this young couldn't have developed antimatter technology. Our own empire only mastered it 500 years ago." Admiral Chen's voice returned over the communication channel, and Kethvar noticed she sounded almost amused. "Admiral Kethvar, while you're running calculations on our power signatures, let me share a little human history with you." The main view screen shifted to show a new image. Earth itself, but not as it appeared now. This was an Earth scarred by weapons fire, with massive craters visible even from space. "This is our homeworld approximately 100 years ago," Chen explained. "We call it the Final War. By that point, we had nuclear weapons capable of destroying continents. We had biological weapons that could wipe out entire ecosystems. We had chemical weapons that could poison the air itself." Kethvar stared at the devastated planet in disbelief. No species he had ever encountered had nearly destroyed themselves and survived to rebuild. "The war lasted 3 years," Chen continued. 2 billion humans died. We came very close to making ourselves extinct. But you know what we learned from that experience, Admiral? We learned that survival isn't about having the biggest weapons. It's about being smarter than your enemy. The image changed to show massive orbital construction yards, clearly built in the decades following the war. Thousands of human workers in spacesuits were assembling structures that dwarfed anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever attempted. After the final war, we made a decision as a species. Never again would we be caught unprepared. Never again would we face extinction because we weren't ready for conflict. We unified our planet, pooled our resources, and began preparing for the day we would meet our neighbors among the stars. Lieutenant Vextal looked up from his console, his face showing pure terror. "Admiral, I'm detecting movement from the outer system. Multiple contacts approaching at significant fractions of light speed." "How many?" Kethvar asked, though he dreaded the answer. 50, 70. "Admiral, I count at least 100 additional vessels inbound. They were hiding in the outer system, using the gas giants to mask their energy signatures." Chen's voice continued its calm explanation. "You see, Admiral, when your scouts first appeared in our system 15 years ago, we didn't see it as first contact. We saw it as reconnaissance preceding an invasion. We've been watching your empire's expansion pattern. We know how you operate." The tactical display now showed the true scope of the human defensive network. Over 200 vessels of various sizes were now visible, forming a sphere around the inner system. But what caught Kethvar's attention were the massive structures positioned near the star itself. "What are those?" he asked Vextal. The tactical officer's hands were shaking as he worked his console. "Sir, I'm detecting massive fusion reactors positioned in close solar orbit. The power output it's like nothing I've ever seen." "Those are solar collectors," Chen explained, apparently monitoring their communications. "We learned to harvest stellar energy on an industrial scale. Every one of those platforms generates enough power to run your entire fleet for a year." Kethvar felt his confidence completely crumble. The Zephyrian Empire's standard approach to primitive species was based on overwhelming technological superiority. But these humans had somehow leapfrogged centuries of normal development in just a few decades. "This can't be real," he muttered. "Your species was using chemical rockets just 50 years ago." "Actually," Chen replied, and Kethvar could hear the smile in her voice, "we were using chemical rockets because we wanted you to think that's all we had. Tell me, Admiral, how long have your people been watching our system?" Vexatal checked his records. 43 years, sir. Long-range monitoring. 43 years, Chen repeated. During that entire time, we've been putting on a show for you. Chemical rockets, radio transmissions, primitive satellites. We wanted any observers to see exactly what we wanted them to see. The horrible truth began to dawn on Kethvar. You've had advanced technology this entire time. Not the entire time, but longer than you think. We developed fusion power 60 years ago, but kept using fossil fuels for our public infrastructure. We cracked the secrets of antimatter 40 years ago, but continued launching chemical rockets where your scouts could observe them. Every signal you intercepted, every technology you observed, was carefully calculated to make us appear primitive. One of the human battleships moved closer to the Zephyrian fleet, and Kethvar got his first close look at its weapon systems. What he saw made his blood run cold. The ship bristled with weapon ports that appeared to use principles he didn't recognize. Would you like to know why we went to such elaborate lengths to appear primitive? Chen asked. Kethvar said nothing, but Chen continued anyway. Because we studied your empire, Admiral. We learned about your integration process. We discovered that species who appear advanced enough to be useful but weak enough to be conquered get the integration offer. Species who appear too primitive get ignored until later, and species who appear too dangerous. She paused, and Kethvar finished the thought with growing horror. Get exterminated. Exactly. So we chose a fourth option. We pretended to be primitive while secretly preparing for war. We wanted to see what kind of neighbors we were dealing with before we revealed our true capabilities. The sensor officer called out from his station. Admiral, I'm detecting targeting locks from every human vessel. They have firing solutions on all our ships. Kethvar looked around his bridge at his crew's terrified faces. These were experienced military officers who had participated in dozens of successful integrations. They had never encountered anything like this. Admiral Chen, he said carefully, what do you want from us? That's simple, she replied. We want you to go back to your empire and deliver a message. Earth is not interested in integration. We're not interested in conquest, but we are very interested in being left alone. And if we refuse? Then you'll discover what weapons a species develops when they spend a century preparing for interstellar war while pretending to be primitive. Kethvar stared at the tactical display showing the overwhelming human fleet. His 12 ships against over 200, with more arriving every hour. Power sources that dwarfed his own flagship. Weapons technology he couldn't even identify. You're making a mistake, he said desperately. The Galactic Council won't tolerate an independent military power. They'll send a proper fleet to deal with you. Admiral Chen's laughter was genuinely amused. Admiral, you keep thinking like someone who holds all the advantages. Let me ask you something. How many species has your empire successfully integrated in the past century? Vextal checked his records again. 47, sir. 47 species, Chen repeated. And how many of them wanted to be integrated? Kethvar didn't answer, but Chen continued anyway. I'm going to guess the answer is 0, which means your empire specializes in conquering species who can't fight back. But we can fight back, Admiral. The question is, are you prepared for what happens when humanity stops pretending to be weak? As if to emphasize her point, the human fleet began moving into attack formation. The precision of their movements spoke to decades of training and preparation. Kethvar realized he was facing a species that had spent their entire history preparing for this exact moment. And he was about to discover whether the Zephyrian Empire was as powerful as they believed when facing an enemy that actually wanted to fight. Admiral Kethvar watched in growing alarm as the human fleet completed its encirclement of his forces. Every tactical principle he had learned over 3 decades of military service told him that his situation was hopeless, but his pride as a Zephyrian officer wouldn't let him surrender without understanding what he was truly facing. Admiral Chen, he transmitted, Your deception has been impressive. But surely you realize that one system cannot stand against the entire Galactic Council. We have over 300 member species. 300 species that were conquered when they couldn't defend themselves, Chen replied. Tell me, Admiral, how many of those species joined your council voluntarily? Kethvar hesitated. The truth was that most species were integrated through the same process he was attempting with humanity. Overwhelming force followed by the offer of protection in exchange for resources and loyalty. I thought so, Chen continued. Let me share something else about human nature, Admiral. We don't just prepare for the fight we can see coming. We prepare for the fight after that and the fight after that. The main view screen shifted to show a new image that made Kethvar's blood freeze in his veins. It was a star map showing the local galactic region, but with dozens of red markers scattered throughout space. What you're looking at, Chen explained, are the locations of every major Zephyrian military installation, fleet depot, and communication relay within 50 light-years of Earth. We've been watching you for 15 years, Admiral. Not just your scouts, all of you. Lieutenant Vextal's voice cracked with disbelief. That's impossible. Those are classified locations. Some of them are supposed to be secret even from allied species. Nothing is secret from a species that assumes it's going to be attacked, Chen replied. While you were observing our primitive chemical rockets, we were launching stealth reconnaissance probes throughout your territory. While you were counting our pathetic orbital satellites, we were mapping every major installation in your empire. A new voice joined the communication, male, speaking with calm authority. Admiral Kethvar, this is General Marcus Rivera, Earth Defense Force Strategic Command. I want to make sure you understand your situation clearly. I'm listening, Kethvar said, though every word filled him with growing dread. Your fleet consists of 12 ships with a total crew of approximately 8,000 Zephyrians. Your nearest reinforcements are 6 days away at maximum speed. Your home system contains approximately 2 billion of your species across 4 planets. The precision of the intelligence made Kethvar feel sick. How do you know all this? Rivera interrupted. Because for 15 years, we've been preparing for this conversation. While you thought we were a primitive species worth conquering, we were studying you, your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. Admiral Chen's voice returned. Admiral, I want you to understand something important. Humans don't just fight wars to win battles. We fight wars to make sure we never have to fight them again. The tactical display shifted to show another terrifying sight. Dozens of objects that had been hidden throughout the outer system were now revealing themselves, massive installations that dwarfed even the largest human battleships. Those are weapons platforms, Chen explained. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. We've positioned them throughout the system using the same stealth technology that kept our fleet hidden from your sensors. Kethvar stared at the display in horror. You're talking about genocide. No, Admiral. We're talking about deterrence. Let me explain the message you're going to carry back to your empire. The view screen changed to show Earth itself, but now Kethvar could see the true scope of human preparation. Massive orbital rings surrounded the planet, bristling with weapons and defenses. The moon had been turned into what appeared to be a giant fortress. Even the asteroid belt showed signs of extensive mining and fortification. This is what a species looks like when it spends a century preparing for war, Chen said. But we're not warmongers, Admiral. We're just very, very good at it when we have to be. General Rivera's voice returned. The message is simple, Admiral. Earth is not available for integration. Any attempt to conquer our system will result in immediate retaliation against every Zephyrian military target within our range. You're bluffing, Kethvar said desperately. Even if you have the technology, you couldn't possibly have the resources to— Admiral, Chen interrupted, you keep making the same mistake. You keep thinking like someone who's always been the strongest person in the room. Let me show you what happens when humans decide something is important. The view screen displayed a stunning image, a massive space station in orbit around Earth that was clearly under construction. But the scale was beyond anything Kethvar had ever imagined. The structure was easily the size of a small moon, and thousands of construction ships swarmed around it like insects. "That's our primary shipyard," Chen explained. "We can build a fleet the size of yours in about 6 months. We currently have 17 more like it throughout the system." Lieutenant Vextal was frantically working at his console, trying to process the scope of what they were seeing. "Admiral," he whispered, "if these readings are accurate, they could build a fleet larger than our entire Empire's navy in less than 2 years. "The readings are accurate?" Rivera confirmed, apparently monitoring their communications. "And that's just our defensive preparations. We haven't shown you our offensive capabilities yet." "This is impossible," Kethvar muttered. "A species this young couldn't have developed such capabilities." "Age doesn't matter when you're focused," Chen replied. "Admiral, your empire has spent 3,000 years conquering species that couldn't fight back. We've spent the last century specifically preparing to fight your empire. Which do you think was better preparation for this moment?" The horrible truth finally hit Kethvar with full force. The Zephyrian Empire had become so accustomed to easy victories against primitive species that they had forgotten how to fight an actual war. Their military doctrine was based on intimidation, not combat effectiveness. "What do you want from us?" he asked quietly. "We want to be left alone," Chen replied. "We want your empire to mark our system as off-limits and find someone else to bully. In exchange, we won't share our defensive technology with the other species you've conquered." The implication was clear. If humanity chose to arm the Zephyrian Empire's reluctant subjects, the Empire would face rebellions on dozens of worlds. "And if we refuse? Then we'll demonstrate why humans are very good at war," Rivera said. "Admiral, we tracked your fleet from the moment it entered our system. We know the location of every ship in your task force. We could have destroyed you before you even knew we were here." Kethvar realized that the humans had allowed him to make his threatening speech and position his ships exactly where they wanted them. They had controlled the entire encounter from the beginning. "You have 1 hour to decide," Chen said. "Either you leave our system and deliver our message to your empire, or we show you what weapons a paranoid species develops when they have unlimited resources and a century to prepare." Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge at his terrified crew. For the first time in his career, he was facing an enemy that was actually ready for war. An enemy that had prepared specifically to fight his empire. An enemy that seemed to understand warfare better than his own species did. "Helm," he said quietly. "Set course for the edge of the system. Maximum speed." As the Zephyrian fleet began its retreat, Admiral Chen's voice followed them. "Admiral Kethvar, remember this moment. Remember that you met a species that was ready for you, and remember that humanity is done pretending to be weak." Kethvar watched Earth disappear behind them, and wondered how he was going to explain to the Galactic Council that they had just encountered a species that might be more advanced than they were. A species that had been preparing for this exact confrontation for their entire recent history. A species that had just taught the galaxy's greatest military power what it meant to face an enemy that actually wanted to fight. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had met their match, and humanity was just getting started.